I just got that ring lighting, you know. I put in
You're doing it right.
yeah, I put in an order for like this.
You're a real professional podcaster now, or Zoomcaster.
Yeah. Well, weirdly
it's all
enough,
about that ring.
yeah, right. You can see it in the eyes.
That's right.
I just put in an order for like a new desktop, so like I'm trying to like kick it up a notch, you know, maybe some streaming and stuff like that, get my Twitch game going.
There you go.
You know how it is. But
yeah.
Anyway, this is episode, I believe, and I should know this shit already. That's how professional I am. This is episode 7.
Lucky number 7.
Lucky number 7 of the Park It Podcast. I got my buddy here, Mike. You want the full name? You want the redacted?
No, Mike Shanahan.
Nice. Mike Shanahan.
Me and Reggie go way back.
Yeah. Dorm days, freshman year of college. Actually, I was thinking about you the other day because the Patrice O'Neal documentary came out. And I was like, I saw Patrice with Mike.
I remember there was that was at the Stress Factory.
Yeah.
And there was some guy, like drunk guy heckling, and he goes like, and the guy's like saying like he's slurring his words, and he goes, "Yo, I'm Brian." Patrice is like, "Man, I don't want to know your name. So when you wrap yourself around a car later, they come to my house looking for answers." He was a savage, man.
He always was. It's funny because like we had issues. Like I think the club has this kind of ridiculous setup, but like we were trying to get in on like that main street, and you got to come down Church Street if you want to get in the Stress Factory.
Right.
So you got to know to even get into the place. I remember Patrice said a little bit, but I'll never forget the guy that opened for him. It was an Asian gentleman. And he had this great bit about like people like expecting like this like stereotypical person. He's like, "What do you want me walking down like samurai armor and stuff like that?" I was like, I wish I knew that guy's name because he was hilarious. But yeah, that's comics for you. I bet there's like 100 people that are like, "Yeah, that black kid was kind of funny that one time." But like no idea who I am. But yeah, what I know these days, what you're back in like the DC area, right? Like that's
Well, I'm in Jersey.
Okay.
Came up because of I mean, we're not going into the office right now, so I said, why would I stay in DC when I could work from home in Jersey? So I'm in Jackson right now.
Nice.
Six Flags country.
Nice.
Working from home. Yeah, I've been doing that for since about a year actually. Now that we're in March now.
Yeah.
What day is it?
I think the 17th is going to be my 1 year anniversary of when shit hit the fan.
Yeah, I think that's like the 17th. Well, that's St. Patrick's Day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think like the weekend after that, Murphy said, "Shut it all down." Yeah. He's like, he wasn't fucking around. And unfortunately, it was probably a little bit too late. But
yeah. Apparently that depends on what side of the political spectrum you're on.
Crazy, man. It's like I remember when people were like complaining that there's no way Trump lost the election. I was like, really? Like 500,000 people died, and there's an economic collapse, and it's that unbelievable that he couldn't lose? I understand if it's close, yeah, but like you can believe that he lost, like
right.
All the pieces are in place for like a catastrophic election loss.
Yeah, I think it's that confirmation bias because like working where I work, I see a lot of people in, like I always said, Trump was always good at the marketing side of this thing, and he had us using measurements of political expression that we typically wouldn't. It's like boats, trucks, how many people are in the airport hangar? It's like, of course I'm going to win the election. There's 20,000 people here. It's like, well, that's not.
Everybody's a jet ski dealership that says I'm going to win by 100,000%.
But like that was kind of his strength, was that he told you what the measuring stick was, and people just walked into it constantly. Just like, why are we doing that?
He's unparalleled in being able to read a room and feed back to them what they want.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's a loop of it's a positive feedback loop that he creates with audiences.
Sure.
And and few politicians really recognize that and are willing to like completely debase themselves just to say it. He was like, I don't give a fuck.
Right.
Yeah, you like that shit? Yeah, here's some more.
No, he's in a lot of ways, he's a lot like I mean, I watched him, it's like it's kind of like a comic. It's like here's a guy who's saying, okay, what's the energy, the vibe, like you're saying in a room. You throw a line out, you start to get that little laugh, and you kind of just snowball that thing. Keep going, man.
I mean, funniest president we ever had.
Yeah.
Love him or hate him, the guy knew his craft.
Yes. Now governing, maybe not so much. Like you said, the 500,000.
No. It's a lot of work, you know. Yeah. It's like you comics, you wake up at like 12, 1 in the afternoon. That was kind of like his theme too.
Yeah.
He got the rhetoric, not so much the hard work involved. There's definitely like an oh fuck moment when the election results came in. He's like, oh shit,
yeah,
I gotta do this now.
That moment was like, all right, well, after this doesn't work out, let me see what the next play is. And he's like, oh, I'm president.
Yeah, Trump TV year. Yeah, exactly.
He's in probably the space he wants to be in right now, though, if you're thinking about it. Like, you have the accolades of being president, you still get basically a whole political party behind you, and you don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Oh, and he'll maybe run again or do some kind of like thing just to like milk a few more dollars out of his supporters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what his original plan was. I heard a great theory that he found out that Gwen Stefani was making more money on The Voice than him.
Right.
So he said, I'll run for president and NBC will have to pay me more. Right. But then like said Mexicans are rapists. And they were like, oh, fuck that. And he's like thrown into this. He's like, oh, ride this out. You know, it's a grift. You know, it's amazing. A lot of people don't realize with politics, people who run in races where they know they're not going to win. You're in like a deep red or deep blue district, but they run as like the other party, live off of donations without the expectation of ever having to do work. And they get like a year to live like a celebrity or somewhat semi-celebrity. And it's a grift. And like the woman who ran against Ocasio-Cortez.
Right.
She had like a criminal record and shit and like, or something like that. And, but it was like living off of donations from like Republicans who were like, oh yeah, we'll get out AOC, finally get rid of her. Not realizing like AOC is going to win that district by 30 points, whatever I do.
Right.
But that lady had the life for a good year, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we're in this phase of celebrity politicking. I mean, like if you look at a character like a Matt Gaetz type character, Marjorie Taylor Greene's starting to fit that mold, which is, hey, I said something outlandish, the media goes crazy, text my donors, boom, boom, wash, rinse, repeat.
And that they stripped her of her committees. And the next day, she said, I'm laughing over this because now I don't have to go do like work in committees where actual shit gets done. It's like, now I can just like tweet all day and go on Fox News. And that's what she wanted. And, you know, they've created this kind of like cult of personality meets like Uber trolling political party, you know, and so many Republicans that used to do work, you know, hate them or like them, they work for what they wanted or what the donors wanted. They got caught up in it. Like I described it as you know the movie Alien, right?
Yeah.
Of course. I think it was the second movie they made it clear that like this is like a government weapons program, and they were like, yeah, we found this alien. We could get eliminated, but let's use the weapon. And that's what Republicans did with Trump, except like now the alien is eating them, you know?
Right.
The same shit is happening to them. Like they can't get out from underneath his tiny paws.
Well, they have to hope that he actually runs because he set up his little, he's got a super PAC now, to your point, where you can funnel money right into that. And the Republican Party's got to hope that all that money is going back into the Republican Party. Now, you and I both know it's not. So the best case scenario is Trump actually runs because he doesn't really need that much money just based off of the brand recognition, right? I mean, you need money, but like honestly, if you just like doesn't do anything, he'll probably get 42% of the vote without doing much. So
yeah.
And it's gerrymandered enough that, you know, I don't know, 2 more points in that, you might take it home, right? Like it's
Right. Yeah. I mean, anything could happen. Like what we saw in 2016, you know. That was what was crazy about that race. It was so unique. And we don't have to go into like politics the whole time, but like what was crazy about that race is there were 2 candidates who both had 100% name recognition.
Yep.
Like there wasn't places you could build from, you know. So whoever started out with the biggest chunk and made the fewest mistakes was going to come away with it.
Yep.
And it's all about turnout. And he didn't. His fans were his supporters were so fanatical. They didn't have to spend money on a election day turnout game.
No,
he had his like Trump vote parties and flags and whatnot. Those people came out like they were committed.
Totally.
And you know, everybody was like, "Oh, he's done horrible. We'll see his numbers go down." His last election, he got the 2nd most number of votes ever. More than Obama.
Yep.
more than well, Roosevelt was a long time. Like most actual votes ever. 2nd most to the guy who lost.
But yeah, I think that's the thing, right? Like I was kind of getting at before. A lot of people that I talk to, like they've been in like upstate New York, Florida, and stuff like that, like their own towns, and they're like, everywhere I go, Trump signs, Trump signs, Trump signs. There's no way he's going to lose. And you know, look, if you take the COVID out of the equation, I mean, like that's land. I mean, I think that's a landslide. Easy.
He wins, absolutely. Yeah,
easy.
I think it would be. I think it would have been close, but I think he pulls out the win. You know, typically, you know, you can gauge somebody's support by, you know, people out putting up signs is one thing.
Sure.
But like a lot of the people who vote for Joe Biden, you keep in mind, like they don't have front yards. You know? Right. They have the building, sidewalk, street. You know, they might put it in their window if they feel so inclined. But also, like, I'm not paying $15 for a sign. You know.
Right. Right.
Or it's like the Trump guy down the block from me, like, has a like 10-foot flag on his like 3-car garage. Like he's got the space to do it. You know.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely
alleys and stuff. It was hard to measure that because like Biden wasn't going to put, you know, 1,000 people in a room.
No, and I think part of that is, you know, when I look at kind of, let's say myself, right, like what you're describing is that aspect of like a lot of Democratic voters are in cities, right? Like it's just the way the demos shake up. They probably don't have front lawns, and if they do they want to deal with like this more kind of energized sort of party of Trump? Is like, I don't want a Trump supporter bothering me because I wanted to put a sign up. Also, like, even without the COVID, it's like, like, yeah, like Biden, I'm gonna pull the lever, but like, am I gonna show up to some 30,000 person event, try to find parking? It's like, I'm only here. I'm only here for the show. Give me the lever. The only way you could get me out is you got to bring like Beyonce and Springsteen out for me to like show up.
Yeah, that's what they did. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Quoting Obama, but like Trump, look, he was the show. So like it made sense that people showed up for him. So
yeah.
But
I remember one thing that really blew my mind was in 2012. Speaking of like this, like voters in the inner city, in 2012, Romney claimed that there was voter fraud because there were precincts in Philadelphia in which he got 0 votes. It'd be like 240 for Barack Obama, 0 for Mitt Romney. There's gotta be a few votes we got. I was like, you should go to those neighborhoods, bro. Yeah. They ain't voting for you.
Yeah.
Have you walked in that precinct? Because no, I think like the third parties who got more votes than Mitt Romney. Like, no, they just ain't your people, man.
Yeah.
You know.
So, sometimes people ain't your people, and I think that that's something that as a culture, I think we have to get it wrapped around our head, right? Like this week, the latest culture war thing was the potato head and Dr. Seuss, and I'm out, bro. You know what I mean? Like I can't take too much time discussing potatoes. Like it's just not really my thing. But
right.
People
Is Mr. Potato Head the hill you're gonna die on?
For some people, yes, clearly.
Has anybody told them where he keeps his pieces? I don't think he's the hero you think he is.
That's a great point. This is not those parts are interchangeable, That's so interesting.
Where does he keep the extra parts?
but like this is the thing that I'm trying to figure out about the current kind of culture war and like our future kind of political prospects. So you're mad at the Dr. Seuss people for cutting the books, right? So your response is to buy the books. That how does that? What is that logically? Why would you do that, right? If you think liberals are like overstepping, you're like, no, this is ridiculous. If I'm a company, I'm like, yo, I'm gonna do something to just poke that bear. How many potato heads were sold this week?
Well, I think for a few hours, Dr. Seuss books made up 48 of the top 50 selling books on Amazon.
It's absurd because, like, look, it's not. I mean, I'm sure there's some of it, but it's not liberals. Like, you'll probably get the kind of virtual signers that go out there and like, oh, I'm going to support Dr. Seuss because this. But like, I saw like conservative talk, like, buy the books. I'm like, what are you guys doing?
I mean, I'm for anything that gets Ted Cruz reading a book.
Yeah.
But like, come on, man. This is ridiculous. It's just his family. It's not like his publisher said we're not going to put these books out. Right. It was his grandkids who were like, look, problems that like the images he was presenting did, and he felt bad about it. Now we're gonna respect the way he was feeling. I don't know why it took him so long, but whatever.
Yeah.
That I mean, there's probably interest in that, but we're gonna respect that, and we're just gonna not sell these books. You could still get like hop on pop if you're really into that thing. Don't freak out because Dr. Seuss's grandkids are trying to be a little more sensitive.
It's just
to what are clearly characters.
Yeah, it's the flavor of the month. Like I actually for a different podcast, I watched The Witches, Roald Dahl's story. Jim Henson Productions made a movie back in 1990. Like a year or two ago, it came out on HBO Max with Anne Hathaway starring in it. Roald Dahl had a few problems with Jewish people, and they had to kind of change kind of the way they depicted witches in the book. And it's like, hey, look, man, I love Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but look, if the guy was racist, he was racist. It doesn't mean I can't enjoy Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but hey, that's good to know.
Yeah. What's crazy is Roald Dahl, or not Roald Dahl, Dr. Seuss did like political cartoons as well. Mm-hmm. You can find these; they're great.
Oh, I've seen some of those.
Yeah, where he basically ties like literal Nazi's beard into a beard of a guy that says "America First."
Yeah,
it's like cool, man. Way to go, Ted Cruz. You're giving money to that family.
100%. Where's the news piece about how Dr. Seuss wasn't really a doctor? You got Dr. Jill Biden out here.
Yeah. We gave Jill Biden such a hard time. That's a great point. I didn't even think of that.
I mean, it is.
Where's the outrage that Dr. Seuss is calling himself a doctor?
I just like at this point, the game is the game, right? Like I'll always be able to. The whole purpose of kind of this podcast, like I want to be able to call balls and strikes, right? Like, look, there's plenty of things Democrats do that suck. I mean, case in point, look at the vote that just happened today for $15 minimum wage. Biden's been backsliding, and Neera Tanden, not a great choice.
Well, like we knew, I knew that like eventually I get disappointed. It's gonna happen.
Did you think it was gonna be within 12 hours?
No, that's what I was like. Not within like what days? It's like he's been in like less than 2 months. I'm like, come on, man, just give me $15 minimum wage. Send the checks, cut the checks. If they're too much, if some rich person accidentally gets a check, you know what you can do? Just tax them on it next year.
Yeah,
get it back. Like this isn't hard. This isn't like rocket science.
But again, this is selective outrage, right? Like. the Lakers got PPP money, you know? Tom Brady got PPP money.
You make a good point, because like people will people like are so into their team, you
Right.
know, that there's so much, like if Barack Obama or Trump or Biden do the same thing, they only see it when
Right.
Trump does it.
Right, right.
The thing of the border with the kids,
The detention center, yeah.
The camp, whatever,
Sure.
you know.
It's not a cage. It's different.
It's not a cage. It's a trailer home. Like, okay, but how many kids are in that thing, you know? But you get so into your team that you start to fail to recognize when they're not living up to what they promised you.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I understand the border is a tough situation, and especially with unaccompanied kids, which seems to be another thing that's happening again. But like, you can still call them out for not doing the right thing.
Totally.
It doesn't make you less of a Democrat, or doesn't make you less of a progressive. You know, people like to say, "Oh, you bet you support Trump." Look, no, I can hate bad things and also like not good things.
Right. Right.
And it doesn't make me the other guy. You know, there's this dichotomy that's been created to our politics that blinds people. You know.
Yeah. You know, the term today is like whataboutism, and you know, it's fine, but like, I mean, it's not fine, but it's just one of those things where I'm getting very tired of intellectually disingenuous conversations, and I'm like running towards people that I can like have a real conversation about these things, you know? Like I find that like consistently, as long as I've known, you've been pretty fair about like your politics and where you stand. Generally, like we are pretty much on the same page. There are times when we're not, and you know, it is what it is. You know, we still go watch the Patrice show.
Yeah. You just see the documentary? I haven't seen it yet. It's good.
I haven't watched all of it yet, but from what I've seen so far, it's very good. And Bill Burr produced it.
I'll put him on the list.
Yeah.
Who?
Bill Burr. So because they're
Bill Burr. Well, then he's I actually saw him in a tiny club in New York.
Nice.
Band called Fuse. It was called the Grizzly Pear. It's like this tiny little bar with like no sign on the front. Yeah, you're familiar. It's right actually down the street from the Comedy Cellar. It's like 3 buildings down. I went to Ben's Pizza where Louis C.K. grabs his slices. Bill Burr is there, and he's finishing up his set before Fuse is set to go, and he goes, "This is like years ago. I was like, we're living in the golden age of global warming right now. Like, take it in while you can, because it's going to suck when this really hits the fan. But hey, right now, I'm living it." It was like a February, and it's like 60 degrees out, you know.
Burr's great. Honestly, like when I look at people like Burr and like Patrice, it's just so interesting that like that sort of selective outrage that we were talking about. Like Patrice has basically, in a lot of ways, become a martyr in the sense that like he was the free speech guy, like Patrice wouldn't take this cancel culture sitting down. It's like, how do you know? Like he was always a proponent for free speech, and I thought he was very good at logically breaking down why he believes what he believed. Right. Honestly, most of the time he said things I was like, I wouldn't really agree there, but it's like I see how you got there. But like there's this little bit of in my opinion, like laziness in the comedy scene that's come out of it, which is like, look what Hicks said at this time. Look what Carlin said. Look what Patrice said. Therefore, I'm going to make a bad joke.
Right.
And it's like
I would love to see, like Carlin, Pryor, like those guys. Obviously, like they're the best that ever was. To anybody who wants to compare themselves to them as a serious perspective that they need to get a hold of. But Carlin was like he had his own way of looking at the world, and that's what made him funny.
Right.
You're not being unique by being
anti-PC. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you're not being like unique by doing that. Carlin was doing his own thing. He didn't care. He didn't have a name for it. He just did what he did, So don't compare yourself to those guys because you're being, controversial,
There's plenty of comics, obviously, like we're more sensitive to certain things as a culture now. There were plenty of people that said all kinds of stuff that we don't talk about. And the reason is because they did it. I guess the word in comedy would kind of be like hack, but like Carlin constructed these logical sort of conversations and really deeply thought about how he felt about the world. Patrice, in the same way, a little more rough around the edges because in terms of content, but like Patrice was ultimately talking about relationships, race relations, and stuff like that, but through his own lens. And it's like he was brilliant not because he just said incendiary stuff. He was brilliant because he made that palatable. And it's like if you don't make a way for people to get on the on-ramp to whatever it is that you want to say, then you can't, like, it's not our fault you suck. Right? Like,
right.
Like, and don't say like, well, that person said this. And it's like, yeah, but how did that happen? A good example to me is like the Gina Carano thing where people are like, oh, what she said wasn't that bad. It's like, yeah, but she's got a consistent history of saying things and she's not that famous.
Right.
If it was Pedro Pascal,
if Tom Hanks said that shit, he could get away with it for like a day or two.
Yeah.
He might make it to the next episode of Mandalorian.
Right.
Gina Carano ain't it.
It's not it. Like there's a chart of how many people bought Disney Plus because Gina Carano is in The Mandalorian. That's a fucking small bar. Yeah. It's like her and her parents.
There's like 3 UFC fans. Right. Who are like, wait, she's in that? I'm gonna spend $19 a month to watch her in 3 episodes blast away at some aliens.
Yeah. Hey, look, diehard UFC fans are known for bad streaming services. I've seen the Fight Pass. But like that,
I've seen the illegal streams on Reddit.
Yeah, that's a part of the conversation that like it's just lost, right? Like this idea of context. I don't know when things lost context, but it seems that it has, right? Like let's just be 100. Like you said, Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks has a long runway. Another good example, Kevin Spacey. He had a lot of tread on that tire before the wheel eventually came off, right? Like you got to build up your buffer. And if you're Gina Carano, you got to know it's like I got no buffer.
Right.
Right.
Right. And unless that's your game, if you're a comic, then you can. That's your game is to be that way. But you're a UFC fighter who's trying to get an acting thing going. Being offensive isn't part of your job description, like it was in a way with like O'Neal or Burr or any of these other guys. Like, so when you get like shit canned from your job, I don't feel bad for you because you weren't doing your job when you did this thing, right?
Right. That's a good point. Like a comic at least has an argument that like, well, but my words are how I make my living, you know? Like an actor's like, what's on the script, dummy? Like, read the words, you know? And
if you want to talk shit, get yourself a fake Twitter account like everybody else and go hog wild. Nobody's going to stop you.
Yeah, you could be...
if by saying it on your own Instagram or Twitter, you were trying to leverage your fame to promote this shitty ideas that you have instead of the other way around. So I don't care, you know. You blew it, you know.
Listen to me, you deaf fuck. I offered you a chance when we could have done something. I offered you a chance to be a cop, and you blew it.
You could have had your fake Twitter. You could have gotten your likes. You could have gotten your retweets. I was going to say Gina Carano. Like, what would we switch it up? Like Gina Carano, you know, on Twitter.
Right.
And you'd have been fine. Nobody would have cared.
Hey, you know, if you're certain elected representatives, you could be a gay black guy that happens to agree with. You remember that story? I don't remember that clown's name, but that was just so funny.
It was a writer, wasn't it? Was it a politician?
Something like that.
Yeah. It was like some guy had like
he hired
like a column in like.
Yeah, sorry, we're gonna keep talking over each other.
We got some connection. Go ahead. You.
Yeah. No, he hired. I forget who's. It was somebody like kind of like Tina Turner, something like that. He hired somebody's son who happened to be like a famous black singer's like son, and he was like, "I'm the person that you're pretending to be, and I am gay, and I am this person." It's like, "No, you're not. You're fucking," you know.
No, it was Buttigieg's campaign manager.
Is that who it was? Wow.
Liz Smith or something like that?
I'm thinking of somebody else.
I don't know. Okay, there's a lot of people playing this game. There's a lot of people playing this game who need to be called down.
Yeah, just for the record, I'm going to look this up because, look, we got the internet, right? Oh, Dean Browning.
Dean Browning?
Dean Brown.
Oh, wait. This sounds familiar.
Pennsylvania Republican, called himself Dan Purdy on Twitter. Retweeted Dan Purdy as himself instead of from his burner account. And then backdoor tried to make Dan Purdy a real person. And like I said, I don't remember the singer, but it was just called like, I don't know, Gladys Knight, one of the Pips. I don't know. What do you want from me? But like, what? Like, what are you doing? I just love that that's a thing that could be on the internet, that like a Republican representative could just be like, "I'm Dan Purdy, a gay black guy, and I think this is bullshit." And it's like, no, you're not. Because you work like a little bit of Congress. Like, you ever have to like work on the burner account? Or are you potentially liable for like retweeting from the main?
No. We get two phones.
Okay.
So my work phone, I just total separation at all times.
Yes. You put the wall up.
I got to keep that air gap between the two units, or I'm liable to make a mistake. Yeah, you gotta be careful. Can't make that mistake.
Yeah. Honestly, well, I guess you're not really in the town right now, because I was going to ask, because like I used to live in DC, as you know.
Yeah.
Worked in Georgetown, you know, made the rounds and watched John King from CNN get into a verbal altercation with a guy at a bar once, allegedly. You know, it's just a very specific town, and I understand why they continuously fail us, because if you're in DC for more than a few hours, you see just the lay of the land down there.
I mean, if you're living there and you're not like from there, it can like warp your brain. Like this is like working from New Jersey has been very like helps me get away from that that kind of neighborhood or that kind of mindset.
Right.
But my favorite, because I went to school there for 2 years and then worked there for another 2. And my school was right across the entrance to the White House, where like people go in if they have like meetings and stuff.
Sure.
Like literally it's my school building and then like the security box across the street for like when you go in. And the craziest thing I saw Kellyanne Conway one time walking with Entourage. I saw Grover Norquist, but my favorite was Charles Barkley walking in, and I was like, what kind of meeting does Charles Barkley have in the White House? He's gonna talk about debt? Like, what's you're gambling too much.
That's so funny. It's so funny because like that's a rough. I mean, if you're really staying in town, that's a rough town for Republicans. There's not much love down there for them.
There was a great article about like a year after Trump took office, and there's this magazine or newspaper down there called Politico, and it's just all politics stuff. I don't know. Only people like within that area, you know what it is because you live there. But yeah, and they put out an article. It was like Republican White House staffers can't get dates in DC.
Yeah.
Like people will like be on Tinder or whatever, and like, oh, that guy looks nice. It says works at, oh, never mind. That's a swipe last thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I feel so poorly for you.
Yeah, you know, I followed that a little bit because, like you're saying, like Kellyanne, I got friends down there. They're like, I used to like this sushi spot, and I saw Kellyanne once, and now I gotta find a new sushi place. But like, honestly, a lot of them moved near like where Nat Stadium is, like in that kind of like, I think northeast type area.
Navy Yard.
Yeah, like the Navy Yard. Virginia's more neutral territory. for them. So like that's where a lot of the congregation happened. But yeah, you're living in a town that one has by population more black people. It's a 92% like Democratic town. You know, you got your donor class, you got your K Street types, but like it's a very liberal city. So yeah, if you're like of the Stephen Miller crowd, you end up in DC, yeah, it's gonna be hard to get a date, bro.
But God bless him, he got married and he had a kid.
Yeah,
in the time he was there. Blows my mind. There's some groupies that are all about it.
Oh yeah.
You'll find
I don't care.
We'll find you.
I don't care what your career is. When you're around kind of money and power, you're always going to have your fans. Let's put it that way.
Oh yeah.
It's not a bad riff either.
No. Oh yeah, totally. I mean, they're but what you should know, because you still have family down there?
Yeah.
Or they're out in Maryland, right? Yeah. Like that city, especially like west of the Anacostia now, is rapidly turning white.
Yep.
It's I mean, you know, gentrification is happening. But there's still pockets where you're walking around, I'll be like the only white guy in the neighborhood, you know, for blocks.
Yeah.
I was doing a project on this guy who was running for city council, like as a third party guy. And he took me around and I was like, most people never see this part of the city, you know? And they're missing out on a lot, but that's just what, you know, DC has become is, you know, if you're, you know, south of like U Street, it's just like white power brokers everywhere, you know?
Yeah, totally.
And yeah.
No, you're right.
It's a shame because the city's got a good vibe to it too, you know?
I know. And it's like, how long is that going to go on as that push out happens? Because like, no, you're right. Yep. Like my time hanging out on like 14th Street, like a little lower than you and stuff like that. Yeah, like it's very difficult to replicate that vibe, but it's very easy to lose it. Like
absolutely.
When you start seeing neighborhoods like you know, there's like Massachusetts Ave down there. When they start calling things like NOMA, North Mass, it's like, all right, that's it. Wrap it up.
Exactly. What was that thing they were doing years ago? They're changing the name of South Central to Central LA.
Oh yeah.
Somebody was like, yeah, they're also changing the name of smog to chewable air.
Right. It's just so absurd, man. God, fucking DC. I had something and I completely lost it, but I don't know. It's just to your point, like it depends on where you go. Like because of like how interesting things were getting, like 8th Street, which was not really, it wasn't a spot. It's now like it's a spot now, you know. It's kind of like how Hoboken in Jersey's on the come up, you know, like
absolutely.
You know,
except there's more parking. You know, slightly more parking in DC.
that's
you actually park on the street. It's outrageous.
Yeah, but like I actually, speaking of those like power brokers, I actually lived off of Connecticut for a while. I was 3 doors down from Comet Ping Pong.
Like, oh shit!
Yeah, dude.
So you got a full view for all the kids running in and out of that basement.
Yeah, apparently, never seen it. It was just one of the most absurd. That was when I realized the power of conspiracy.
Yeah, that's actually probably when it hit for a lot of people. Yeah,
I was always like, yeah, conspiracy theories, but like being so close to somewhere and knowing people that work there and stuff like that, and just hearing how it all went down, I'm just like, wow, you can make anything a story. And me just saying that.
What's crazy?
Sorry, but I'm saying me just knowing that, like, how much bullshit the story is actually makes me compromise, because now I'm like a shill for, you know, the Podesta.
What's crazy about like conspiracy theories, and so I guess crazy. What's so damaging about them is that they're always very reactionary, in that they remove your power to do anything to change your condition. It's up to some elite in a, you know, some kind of lair somewhere in a volcano is making the decisions. And it's like, no, like you have power to change things, not like you individually, but if you work with others, you can actually change it. But like, conspiracy theories are like aliens are doing it, or like lizard people, or like Satanist cabal of Democrats and Hollywood elite, you know?
Right. And you know, it's always that nugget of truth, right? Like when you're around power, people abuse power, right? Like here's an example. Cuomo right now, what he's going through, rightfully so.
The most predictable controversy ever. Like, who did not see this coming?
Yeah, I remember like a year ago around when he wrote the book, and I was like I said, I keep my
that book is so great. The book, somebody did a chart of like COVID cases in New York, and there was an early spike, and then they did really well for like 5 months. 5 months, book comes out to the moon.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's paying attention knows, knew that like he had a penchant for that, and you could see it because a few weeks or a month or so earlier, when they started getting the vaccine rollout, his health advisors and his health commissioners and everything had put together this plan about getting into the counties, and the counties would distribute it where it needs to go. And like days before they start, he said, "No, fuck that. I'm taking control of everything. We're going to give it to the hospitals, and the hospital's going to do all of it." And everybody's like, "What the fuck?" And like half of his health advisory team just like quit. What are you here for? But you could see because he had this arrogance, and he even said, like, I think he said, "Do I trust the experts? No." I was like, well, fuck you. Dude. Like, people are dying. Can you like get it together? Yeah. And it's that level of like, he's not a Trump, but he's got that kind of arrogance about him that makes him off-putting to me. And I think to anybody who's like looking at it with open eyes, people just, a lot of people like him because he was like that other voice of reason while Trump was saying like COVID wasn't real. But you gotta keep it real and recognize what's happening in front of you,
Right. Like I said, I keep my ears to the ground on like a lot of things. So like when the undercounts were happening, that story broke last year. That story's been out there for a while, but like now it's kind of mainstream eyes, right? Like it's just one of those things. Like you say, you gotta keep it like 100, right? If you start to sway because of who's doing what, it's just not. It doesn't end well, right? Like we can't treat a guy that like basically you have the sort of political corruption combined with like the we're in that Me Too era, so like you got that side of it, and it's just like, what do you stand for, right? Like do you only stand for it when it's people you don't like, or do you stand for it when consistently? It's like, look, I put it about like myself. If someone drums up something about me and I'm like, oh shit, like, and I never thought about it in this context. It's like, hey, that's the game, man. Like I can't, I can't be upset, right? So I'm saying this, that like cancel culture to me, one, I think it's overstated, but two, it's like, hey man, like them's the breaks. Like I don't know,
Right. And you can, if somebody said something 20 years ago, like Kevin Hart's an example of this.
Great.
He said some really bad shit about like, was it gay? If his son was gay or something like that.
Yeah.
But like he came and he apologized and said like, look, man, I was wrong, and got through it. And now he's making movies again. So like nobody's canceled.
Right.
Like unless you did like some like sexual assault or something, that's different. But if you just said something offensive, people will forgive you if you've shown that like you've changed and you like apologize and try to make amends if you actually hurt people,
Right.
Like that's why like Kevin Hart's back, but Kevin Spacey isn't.
Right.
That's why like Gina Carano could have gotten her job back if she just said like, look, I'm sorry, but she was so stubborn about like, I'm being persecuted. No, you're not.
No.
You're not.
No.
You're working for the mouse. You don't fuck with the mouse, okay?
Yeah.
You say something offensive, the mouse is going to fire you, period. Don't be stupid. The mouse has a reputation to withhold, upkeep,
And, like the mouse has had its past, because like we talked about Roald Dahl, we talked about Dr. Seuss. Disney had his
Song of the South.
Yep. So it's like they already got that heat that they've, wash the brand, we're back in good graces. They don't need some,
Right.
again, if it was Pedro, maybe, right? Maybe. If it was Pedro Pascal, maybe. You know what I mean? Like, that's the star of the show, even with the helmet on. Like, you think Disney's taking a 2% stock dip because Gina Carano? Like, what? Get out of here.
Right. It's. I mean, let's not give them too much credit. It's a financial decision.
Oh, it's 100% a financial decision.
Like,
just like the
Dr.
Seuss.
That's what they're about. Yeah. Probably.
Yes and no.
Like,
yes and no.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a personal decision by the family, but probably is plays a part in it. But although I don't remember anybody like really looking into Dr. Seuss and making a big deal about it before they said this.
Yeah. You might be right, man.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But Disney, like the people who make decisions, have like a legal responsibility to make as much money as they can for their stockholders and their shareholders. They are not going to skirt that responsibility to help you if you're an asshole.
Yeah.
They're going to dump you because it saves them money.
Yeah.
Period. That's like the end of the game, And
that's it, man. Like, it's just one of those things where I think there's just a segment of the population, because we were talking a little bit earlier about the political game, and there's this sort of idealized past that people are remembering where you could say inflammatory things in different places. It's like, yeah, I guess, but like, were we really all just like, I'm at work, go fuck yourself? Like,
Right. It wasn't. I mean, you could never, there wasn't a past where you could like ever say your boss is a shithead and get away with it.
Right.
That never existed. Like, let's be real.
Right.
If you were, if you said something that put down Black people, gay people, Asian people, women, that was cool 30, 40, 50 years ago. But now those people like aren't putting up with that shit anymore. Right. So your real problem is people who have been shit on for generations in this country saying, that's not cool, we're not going to put up with it anymore. Now it's an issue for you,
Right.
So what are you really fighting for? Like if you said if you have a political position that doesn't have to do with offending people, it's a political position about, let's say, like taxes. Nobody's going to cancel you because you think we should cut taxes for rich people.
That's true.
You might lose fans maybe, but like they'll watch your TV show. Like look at what the guy from Vince Vaughn. Vince Vaughn is like a real weirdo with his politics. Like people go to see his movies because like he's not outwardly like offending people who are otherwise powerless. Okay.
Right.
So we've hit a point in society where, at least to a degree, people who were previously powerless can at least speak up and say enough's enough, or I'm not going to take it.
Right.
Whether or not they have the power to like actually change the societal situation, that's another story. So when you say like, oh, you can't say what you want anymore, it's like, well, what is it that you're not being allowed to say? Be specific.
Right. Yes.
It's like when people say, you've heard the thing like, the Civil War is about states' rights. It's like, well, states' rights to do what? Like, it's a similar kind of framing.
Let's keep going. Yeah.
Then this train of thought for a second.
Yeah. No, I mean, you make a great point there, which is like, there's plenty of people that are conservative in Hollywood. Like Clint Eastwood yelled at a chair for, an hour. And like,
oh my God.
Yeah, remember that shit? But like, people went to see Richard Jewell. Like, I just think that part of it is you gotta know what you're dealing with, right? Like, you're going to Hollywood, so like this idea of like Hollywood's so liberal. It's like, yeah, nothing changed. Nothing changed. You're on a coastal city with a shit ton of money in it, and in an industry that has to cast a net that's all kind of inclusive to make the maximum profit. Yeah, shut up over there or do your own thing, right? Like, that's kind of where we're at. Actually, to your point about sort of like marginalized groups as well, I was thinking about that. Like, we sort of, as a collective, I guess people that would not that there really is in the mainstream a real political left in this country, but people that kind of identify towards the left, like recognize when potentially like a group may be sort of ostracized or taken, you know, otherized, right? And kind of actively fights against that. Like earlier this week, I posted some random thing and then it got into a conversation about like trans people in sports, right? And it's just like,
yes,
I don't know how. Yeah, it's like, this woman named Heather Fitch. No, excuse me, this woman named Heaven Fitch was the first woman to win state wrestling title in high school at 106 pounds. Like, I'm a former wrestler, kind of interesting to me.
Yeah.
And, you know, you posted something like, "Oh, I don't see the Protect Women crowd showing up," and I was like, "Yeah, because it's not part of their ridiculous narrative," and it spurred this whole thing, right? And
my bad.
I think it's fine. Honestly, the person that posts on you is very right and does that all the time, which is fine. But I you know, my personal kind of offense with the way that the conversation about trans people in sports is framed is that it doesn't feel like it's actually like a conversation, right? Like you'll constantly see like, here's a meme of some person at some point in time, not current, like Fallon Fox gets brought up all the time. The last time Fallon Fox fought was quite some time ago, right? Like, but this is I think Gina Carano's fought since Fallon Fox has fought. But like, this is the person that we constantly bring up. Or here, I saw a photo of like a woman that was playing like D3 college sports, and she transitioned, was a former Navy person. They're like, it's like, okay, here's a person that kind of reads as masculine, that is a trans woman. ... Right? Like that logical conclusion thing, and it's just like, I hate that argument because these same people will not do a thing to help women's sports. They won't go to the game.
Right.
They won't watch.
They want to cut Title IX.
Right. And it's just like, you're not actually trying to protect women. You're trying to discriminate against a group of people. And, you know, there are real arguments that you could potentially make about trans people in sports, but like, they're not getting made. So I'm going to have to assume that your argument is not rooted in a real conversation about like empowering women in general to live their best life through sports, because you don't. Right? And,
I'm sorry, man. I'm really sorry, dude.
You're cool. Let's see. So, plus, I've done so many podcasts, I know exactly where to pick up. So, yeah, I mean, for me, right, like, the conversation, I actually thought that, I'm glad that conversation ended up kind of going where it did, because not that we're going to change anyone's minds on Facebook or anything like that, but I thought, like, I never thought about it this way, right? Like, wrestling is a sport that I've been involved in. Because of the nature of wrestling, there's not really a lot of women's participation in it at a meaningful level. So there's a lot of like sort of intergender wrestling that happened at every level of the sport that I participated in, besides like the NCAA, right? So like, I wrestled women in college, I wrestled women in high school. I wrestled women when I was younger. It's just so funny, like when Heaven won her match, people were making arguments that were like, well, girls develop faster and they're stronger when they're younger. And I'm like, so what is it?
Which is it? Which is it, folks?
But like, it did make me think about the logistics of it. Like this idea of like, there should just be two separate divisions. It's like, well, you're already cutting most sports, right? Like, it's kind of hard to play water polo and fence these days. You know what I mean? So, and those are sports where like you legitimately could have like either gender, or, you know, however you want to break that up. Because again, that's a complex conversation. I don't even think I'm necessarily the right person to have it. But there are plenty of sports that it really doesn't matter if it's a guy, girl, however we want to break that down again. The other side of it is no one talks about how much people suck at sports. I was a wrestler for 12 years. You know how many guys I beat the fuck out of? I've had matches with girls where I'm like, oh shit, I might lose. Right. There are guys.
I think you mentioned that. Yeah.
What about them? What about the weak?
Right. Like there are players like in the WNBA who could play starting positions on some NBA teams. Let's be real. Like you said.
Yeah.
There's a football player, Vanderbilt.
Okay. The kicker.
The kicker. Mm-hmm. I think during COVID, they had a girl who, I think maybe it was the same girl. She was from the soccer team.
Yep.
But their whole kicking squad, like, we're all hanging out in a hotel room and all got COVID. So they called her up and like, hey, can you come kick for us for a few weeks? And she did, and she did fine. And she did really well.
Yeah.
So with the issue with that we're dealing with when we talk about trans women, trans men participating in sports is if you tell them they can't play on the girls' team or they can't play on the guys' team, what's the alternative? So they talk about locker rooms, right?
Sure.
Well, you just told that kid that they can't play in the women's team, so you're going to send somebody who appears outwardly to be a woman and make her go in the men's locker room,
right?
It's like the whole thing with bathrooms. Like they say, like I don't want a trans woman coming into. I don't want somebody who transitioned into a woman coming into a women's restroom.
Sure.
All right, you're going to send that person into a men's room.
Right.
Like, think about what happens when somebody who is biologically a female but presents as a male. What happens when you now force them into the women's room? Yeah. You think that's going to end good for anybody? No. Let them live who they are.
Right. And not even taking into account of even outside of whether or not someone's transitioning, whether or not how they gender affirm. It's like people look different all the time. There are people that are not transitioning that could present as male very easily, and it's like we're not having, in my opinion, like you said, all this is my opinion, right? Like I don't think we're having a real conversation about this. So my assumption is that there are people that are participating in the discrimination of a group in a very arbitrary way that are trying to hide behind these narratives. And I know they're hiding behind narratives and talking points because they're all the same ones. Now,
exactly. They all sound the same.
It's the same fucking argument. And to them, it sounds like common sense. We were talking about conspiracy earlier. Yeah, fucking flat earth. It sounds, sure. Sounds reasonable. I just always think that if you're going to believe shit like that, because there's a lot of conspiracy running around these days. Don't text me, right? If you don't think the Earth's round, don't text me because I don't want to know how that magic got into my phone.
Yeah.
I'm sensitive to this because I have a sibling that is trans. I don't know if you know that, but I do. And when they competed in high school, they weren't transitioning at all, right? They just they were on the team that they were on, right? I don't know, sports was important for kind of everybody in my family. And I learned a lot of very valuable lessons that weren't always about winning, right? Like the other side of the sports conversation about fairness. Every other time we talk about sports, we talk about how it's not fair, right? If Patrick Mahomes wants to play one-on-one fucking football with me, no one's like, oh, well, he's short. What are we going to do? They're like, tough luck, buddy. And it's just like, what changed, right? Like, what changed? There are people that talk about like the steroid era of baseball. It's like, why are people okay with that, right? And it's just like, we're not consistent in our arguments. And again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but because people are not consistent in their arguments, I assume that there's an ulterior motive.
Right. I mean, yeah, they know that like what they feel, they're like ashamed of like the hatred or the bigotry they have inside. They know it's probably not okay, so they come up with this reason that they just take from talking points why it's okay to discriminate against certain people.
Right.
They've taken the talking points from Fox News or radio or whatever.
Right.
And that's the excuse, the shield they use, because I think many of them deep down know that they have some kind of shame about they just don't, they're transphobic. They just don't like trans people.
Right.
But they can't say that. So it's about, oh, well, it's unfair to the girls.
Sure. But like, the reality is like, because I like numbers and figures and stuff like that. We're basically at the point where like, at that level, like high school, where it even begins to even slightly begin to matter, right? It's like 11% of kids today. Like 11% of kids participate in sports after.
Just in sports, right?
Yeah, in sports. Sorry, no, not yeah. Those numbers would not be would not work. The number of like trans people, at least documented in the United States, is much smaller than that. But like, which is another reason why like this is all nonsense, by the way. This crazy argument that people are making, but we went from active participation in sports, and because we've privatized everything, right? People literally argue that there's no merit in people participating in sports that don't make money, right? So when, like I mentioned, water polo and fencing get cut, people are like, well, it's because they don't make money. And it's like, well, why is that? If sports is part of your education, why does it matter that it's a revenue builder? Except, as I know, that the education in this country is capitalism.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if they cared so much about like whether or not the sport made money, they maybe would think about paying high school or college athletes for if it's all about capitalism, pay the guys doing the work.
Right.
But yeah, you make a good point that like for a lot of sports, I mean, for instance, there are sports that are very cheap to put on. Basketball.
Wrestling is one of them.
All you need is wrestling is another example, right? You need helmets and spandex and a soft mat. Like you can make it happen.
Yeah.
Basketball is another one. There's a court in every town with like a beat up backboard if you need it. Like hockey is not one of those sports. So anybody who's interested in hockey, you have to have some money to pay rink time, for all the equipment. And schools used to prioritize certain things like sports and arts and stuff like that. Let's be real, not all schools.
Right.
A lot of poor schools that had to cut that. That's a whole issue with how we pay for schools. But so it creates a entrance fee for kids. And you know what? If the parents, it's been harder and harder for parents to pay for all expenses because wages have been stagnant and inflation has caused what they make to be worth less and less. So they have to cut something.
Sure.
And it's some poor kid who could have been the next Wayne Gretzky.
Right.
Doesn't get to play. He sits at home and plays on his phone or whatever.
There are, because we have collectively as a society decided that these things don't make money. Like for instance, again, we're doing a COVID bill right now, and people argue, why are we giving money to the John F. Kennedy Performing Arts Center? And it's like, hey, when you like travel to other countries, what are some of the stops that you make? Do you go to the museum usually? We have these national treasures. Like everyone loves the King of Pop, right? Everyone loves Prince. They love Michael Jordan, but like no one wants to fund the next. It's absurd.
You make a good point. When people come to or go traveling, where do they go? New York like their economy, their tourist economy is centered around Broadway.
Right.
And those places are closed right now. So a whole sector of their economy has been shut down for a year, and it's going to be shut down probably for another year.
Right.
So what do you do with like that industry in which 60% of people have been laid off? We're just going to let them freeze flat in the wind? Like, what are we doing for them?
And it's because in a lot of ways, and like I get it. Trust me. Like I actually recently read this book called Capitalist Realism that it's pretty enlightening. I forget the author's name, but I'm sure someone can find it. And it had a quote that basically like people could imagine the end of like society, like the world itself, sooner than they could see the end of capitalism in this country. It was like, yeah, it's true. Like people are actively arguing.
Heard this theory.
Yeah.
Heard this theory and said why zombie shows and movies became so popular after the crash in 2008.
Interesting.
Because people saw the economy collapsing around them and could not imagine a world existing without capitalism, and so just basically extended it to the world stopped existing as it is and zombies.
Right.
And for like 3 years, like every other show is a new zombie show.
That's a good point.
Mark Fisher.
Mark Fisher. That's the it's a good book. You could probably read that book in an afternoon. I believe my buddy Aneem. That's who recommended. I'm in a book club with him, and another one of the subjects that we were going to talk about today. It reminded me of that. We both had watched Judas and the Black Messiah, and phenomenal movie. Does a really good job. Like Hollywood always does, misses some of the mark because I don't think they talk enough about Fred's involvement with socialism. Really, kind of. Would you say Marxism? I'm not like as, historically like up on it as I think you probably are more than me actually. But I would say he had this very kind of like Marxist lean on his.
I mean, I think the Black Panthers identified themselves as like almost Maoist. Every new member of the Black Panthers got a copy of it's called Mao's Red Book. It was like a book of quotations by Mao Zedong.
Sure.
So they were, I mean, some of them were more, there's obviously with any group, there's a spectrum of where they landed, but a lot of what they were talking about was like Marxist theory. Absolutely. I mean, Marxism is the core that from which a lot of other interpretations of the world build. What it is essentially it's an examination of the economy as it is. It's not so much a political thing as it's a understanding of power and where it lies, which is is really politics. But I think there was a point in which they said in the movie, politics is war without bloodshed, and war is politics with bloodshed. That's Mao. So he was. I mean, I don't know where on the spectrum you would say you put him, but ultimately, I don't think it mattered too much.
I don't think so. I don't think so either.
Pinpoint it down.
Yeah, I don't think that it matters too much, but I bring it up in the context of that quote. I think Cory Booker kind of quoted him the other day. And again, like I said,
I saw that.
Yeah. Like there's a line and he kind of stops before the next line, which was like, and we're going to solve this with socialism. Hold up.
I'm going to pull that one up because that was a good one.
Yeah. I'm trying to simultaneously do that because my buddy Ken wrote about it.
Yeah, Cory Booker, because I think it was the anniversary of Fred Hampton's killing, if I'm not mistaken, is when they posted it. Yeah, he says, we don't think you fight fire best with fire. We think you fight fire best with water. Pop up there. We're not going to fight racism. We're going to fight racism not with racism. We're going to fight with solidarity. We say we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism. We're going to fight it with socialism. Cory Booker cut out that last line. So all the comments underneath that were like, finish the quote, Cory.
Right. And I think that we're kind of at this precipice as a country, right? Like the general idea of sort of Trumpism versus, I guess, honestly, Bidenism is not the right word because to me that's nothing, right? Like it's just
No.
Basically, the new form of republicanism, like the center, this revenge of the center, basically.
Yeah.
So we're at this point where, as a collective, you know, you have this old guard that remembers kind of fighting the Ruskies, as it were. They have this idea of like communism and what it means to them. But what they're not recognizing is that like that time of sort of glut that they had worked out really well for them. It did. And capitalism was humming along at the time. But you've given a generation of people this consistent failure. And I mean, there's no other way to describe it.
Absolutely.
You have 9/11 and what happened afterwards with our kind of forever wars. You have, at a time where me and you were coming out of school, like you have the 2008 financial crisis. And then we've turned that around and we're basically kind of coming into our peak earning years. And you just handed us this coronavirus debacle. And, you know, the question is it working? So like, you know, there's always that question of like, do we want to be a socialist society? Now, I'm literally not really like that far left on the political spectrum. But as this conversation keeps going on, and this is kind of the cultural war we're fighting now, it's like, hey, look, man, at least they're rooted in history, talking about like, you know, real socioeconomic problems. And we're not just saying arbitrarily like capitalism must succeed, because like, is it succeeding? I don't know. Maybe it works for me, but it doesn't work for everyone.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was born in 1988.
Same.
The Soviet Union collapsed. What, 89? They could fully transition really in 1991. Soviet Union started to collapse in 89. By 91, it was gone. So I have no like living memory of that era.
Sure.
You know? Right. So our generation is over the last few years, we like millennials have become the largest generation, if you want to call it that.
Sure.
You know, people born between 1981 and 97, I guess, is about when they cut it off. So people who have like no living memory of like the Cold War,
sure,
right? In any real sense, especially not like memory while they were politically engaged. So they're not becoming the largest generation, and if they started voting with the numbers that they have, they would overwhelm every other voting bloc. You know, we took over from the baby boomers. Generation X got screwed. You know, they never were and never will be the largest generation. So they don't have a lot of the stigmas that our parents' generation came up with.
Right.
That because they were, you know, we were fed propaganda about the Reds for 100 years. You know.
Sure.
So they're kind of like, they don't have a set relationship with either capitalism and socialism or Democratic or Republican Party.
Right.
I did actually, my graduate thesis, I did a short documentary, which I'll send you. It's like 9 minutes. It's not.
I think I've seen it, but send it to me
Okay,
again, because it's been a while.
And basically what I showed was that for every other generation, as people got older, they're more likely to identify with a political party. That makes sense. You start to fall into your patterns and your beliefs, and they solidify as you get older.
Sure.
Millennials, while by far the most progressive in most metrics generation ever, perhaps, while that's true, and they've actually gotten more progressive, their identification with a party, either Democrat or Republican Party, has gone down. The only generation we've seen that happen.
Yeah.
Literally the only year in which party identification among millennials went up was 2008, when Barack Obama. Everybody's,
Sure.
ooh, I like Barack. Maybe I'm a Democrat. You know.
Makes sense.
But everything else, they've gotten out. So they're looking at things, I think, in a more independent way, and they're just making a decision based on what they've seen in front of them. And like what you said, like we've experienced, our generation has experienced what, 3 recessions: 2001, 2008, and then this last year. Literally, there are kids in the army in Afghanistan who are not alive when 9/11 happened. Like that's how long we've been doing this. and we're not seeing like the benefits that were promised to us. Like you and I we entered college in 2006, so 2 years before shit hit the fan. And your parents and your guidance counselors and your teachers told you, look, it doesn't even matter what you study. You go to college, you get a degree, you'll be able to get a job when you get out.
Yep.
They maybe steer you away from like fine arts or something, like if but like go to college, get a degree, and you'll be able to get a job, and at least be able to make a living. And then like we're halfway there, we're halfway done, and the bottom falls out. So like that promise was broken, and it was such a core promise of our country for so long that it kind of shattered the whole illusion or whatever.
Very disillusioned.
Of American dream. Yeah. So it totally makes sense that kids our age and younger identify more with an alternative,
right,
and capitalism itself.
Right. So it's
bear that out.
It's one of those things, right, where like I talked to another guest on this podcast before about like the defund the police movement. It's not my job to do PR for your institution. Like if your institution wants to survive, it's your job to fight for yourself. And like there's plenty of people obviously on the political right, at least as it's defined in this country, that are like pro-police and stuff like that, but clearly not that much because January 6th. But it's just like, hey man, if someone was like looking at my job performance, I'm not tasing a fucking 9-year-old, right? Like I don't even care what the circumstances are, right? Like it's just like, hey man, we're getting a lot of heat. Maybe tase was not the right word. It was pepper spray. That's my bad. Wrong violence. Maybe don't pepper spray 9-year-olds that are handcuffed. Because like, what are you gonna say? Oh, they kicked the car too much? Like, the fuck out of here! Like, stop it.
Right. I mean, it's interesting. There's simultaneously this like militarization of police and this like machoization of police, and like they're identified almost as like a step below troops.
Right.
Pledge to the police or whatever.
Sure.
Support the police. But then also like if that's your standard, how do you justify beating the hell out of a 10, 9, 11-year-old?
Right.
Come on, man, which is it?
Right. And that's the question. It's like, what is it? So like, I bring that up mostly just to say that like, capitalism's job is to make the argument for itself. It's and again, I understand the boomer generation and everything like that. It's saying, no, look at all these times socialism failed. But it's like, honestly, capitalism is not a very old form of doing things. It's like, it's younger than this country.
Years,
like
200 years.
Like,
right,
what?
Yeah.
We've spent most of recorded human history doing something different. And I'm not, look, like I said, at this moment, the system's working for me. So I'm not here to say like burn it all down, but I am saying that like, if you're not going to put up a reasonable argument.
Right. Marxism and Karl Marx said, like, basically his argument was that we've gone through transitions of systems. And he was writing this in like the 1840s when our understanding of capitalism was relatively new, Sure. It's funny to think, I think he was like born in like 1818 and like died in the 1880s or something like that, something along those lines. Like think about the way how much the world changed in that period of time. But he basically made the point that we've gone through systems where at first he started with like kind of like communal communities, like hunter-gatherers working in communities, sharing land and resources. And then we moved into like a slave system and feudalism, which tied people to the land. But technology progressed to the point where like that was unsustainable. That collapsed and was replaced with capitalism as we moved away from feudal lords and kings and serfdom into capitalism, workers and owners, and socialism is in his theory just like the next step in that process. So hell, you could, I mean, the argument could be, hey, had a pretty good run,
Yeah.
200 years, not too bad.
I love Gordon Gekko. That shit was fun.
and he made the point that like, you had to go through capitalism to get to socialism, communism. Like, and part of what some people think what happened with the Soviet Union and why that experiment didn't work is because they moved straight from what it was essentially feudalism into socialism. There wasn't that capitalist period to build a kind of industrial base that would be able to provide for everyone.
That's fair. Like the idea of, if you're looking at sort of the way this country's structured, we are kind of at the point where the mechanization to get these resources is there. We just haven't distributed it in a reasonable way given our like overall kind of wealth, right? Like this is about as good as it gets for a country. And yet we have all these problems with depression, with like no one, I think today is going to argue that this is a great time for Americans in terms of feeling good about America, right? Like clearly something's amiss if we're arguing about potatoes in their heads or lack thereof, right? Like there's a problem, right? And perhaps it is that we have monetized everything. Like no one sees the value in sports anymore, right? Like just because I'm not 6 foot tall doesn't mean I shouldn't play a sport, because maybe I'll learn some sort of lesson that will actually feed the capitalism, right? Perhaps you should focus on whoever's going to be the next Basquiat, because I don't know, people might come and fucking look at that shit.
Yeah, right. And someday some rapper will like steal your signature and put it all over his products and make a ton of money.
Yeah, and it's just like we are turning into a society that reveres the old, right? Like, and I think this is kind of consistent, right? Like, if you're living at any point in time, go back 20 years, it's actually in that capitalist realism book, go back 20, 30 years, people are going to say that was the best time, right? Like, it's just human nature. But like,
because you were a kid and you didn't have responsibilities and you associated the time with like being carefree.
Right. But it's just this idea of like, what are we, right? Like, what are we doing? What is our time? Like, I actually think that we're kind of potentially in a renaissance, because the way this this time is shaking up, people have more free time, they're not working as much, some of the creative stuff is happening kind of behind the scenes. I look at myself, like, again, not to my own horn or anything, but like, I'm trying to learn how to play guitar. I started painting, I did yoga. Like, I'm doing a bunch of random shit because I have more time.
I've read more books in the last like 4 months than I have in years.
Yeah, same. So so something good may come of this, but like, I guess what I'm saying though is that like, we are in a precarious position, and like the theory that you're saying, and like that makes sense. I actually have on my list of things to read the Communist Manifesto, which I probably knock out super quick.
It's a pretty quick read. Yeah, it's a lot shorter than people think. It's not like a plan for like how to do communism or anything like that. It's an examination of the situation as it is and where it was and where it could go. That's a bad description of it, but it's worth reading. It's worth, even if you're like a Milton Friedman super fan, like it's worth reading it to understand. Yeah, dropping the Friedman reference.
Nice.
It's worth reading just to get a full understanding, because it's one of the most influential books of the last 200 years.
Yeah.
Think about like the billions of people who have lived under the theories of Karl Marx in our history, just the last century or so.
Well, I mean, going back to sort of the Judas and the Black Messiah, like to see that sort of framework, that theory played out real time in this sort of racialized political movement is fascinating, right? Like, and like we were saying before, this time feels very shaky. right? Like the American experiment, like within the last 3 months was like questionable. Like we may, and honestly, like a lot of things, we may have already failed. You know, like when you're kind of testing anything, like whether it's financial, like the 2008 crisis is a great example.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you just woke up and like, oh no, now it's over. No, it was over 4 months ago. You just found out.
Oh yeah.
It's over. It's like
the season's planted.
This might be over, and I you know, maybe not, but like it might be.
You know, capitalism has a has a way of often, you know, changing the rules to protect itself, and so it's definitely a point in time to watch as far as like where we go. Like we could look. What I'm saying is like 20 years now, we could look back and say, oh, it was early 2021 that is where everything changed.
Right.
You know.
Right.
To your point about Judas and the Black Messiah, like what I think they did a decent job, because understanding that it's a film and they have to cover a lot of things.
Right.
Decent job, like when they introducing O'Neal to the system that they're doing their lessons, and those classrooms are real. They look like that. That's how they taught them. They taught kids that shit, which is crazy. If you ever seen there's actually a documentary, you can watch it on YouTube. It's called The Black Power Mixtape.
Okay.
Check that out. That'll really, if they show scenes of like kids like learning this stuff in like extra classrooms they go after school. So, and I understand it is a Hollywood movie. They have to kind of broad spectrum. So I think they handled that well. I think what I thought they rushed through was how he organized with other groups.
Yeah, that was kind of like an aside
in Chicago, which
like
was like
one
of the most important. The Young Lords, the Young Patriots. They kind of touched on. They didn't really show him organizing too much with the Young Lords, just out on the street ones. The Young Patriots, like they go to their headquarters, like a Confederate flag in the background.
Yeah.
And somebody makes a comment. Oh, the hell is this crack of shit? But like they recognize the Confederate flag as just like rebelling against authority. There were racists in that organization, sure. But they made a point. They made a point in their platform, because each of these groups, like the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, the Young Patriots, had a platform, and each one expressly written was like, we are anti-racist. And so I think what scared the FBI was when, I mean, it's one thing if a bunch of Black people show up to a rally, but when they're flanked by Latinos, poor white folks from Appalachia,
right,
and they're all in one space, I think that's what spooked him, and that's probably what got Fred Hampton killed.
Oh, probably.
They couldn't be having that.
A great example, and it was a small moment in time, a good one, but like a small moment in time after the George Floyd killings, like the reaction and the crossover between the races and across socioeconomic was, for a time, short, but profound, right? And that's where our power lies as a people. And I mean that like across the board. Like obviously I'm a Black guy, you're a white guy, you know what I mean? Like, but like we have been fed kind of like the racist excuse, right? We've been fed all these different excuses. And what you were saying about conspiracy was a good point, that like, but what can I do about it? When it's like, this is actually a classism argument. And like I said, I'm not really like tracking as like a radical, left person, but like the more and more this happens, it's just like, hey man, like like I said, you're not putting up a good fight. So if the options are, okay, we're going to get here and then $15 minimum wage, I'm going to have 8 random senators from like Delaware and West Virginia take something that's like a 65, 82% issue amongst all people, regardless of party. It's like, well, then like you're no longer representing us. Like this Democratic Republic is not representative of the electorate. So like, it's not my job to make you popular. It's not my job to stop you from getting revolutionized. So like a guy like me that may have pushed back a little bit and say, hey guys, we shouldn't do this. Now I'm just sitting on the porch like,
you think if they were trying to defend their status, they would like throw a bone to people?
Yeah.
Maybe don't like shove in their face and say, oh no, we're not going to give you that. $15 an hour. Like, come on, dude. You're not like living large on that shit.
No.
That would be an easy. It would like loosen the lever, let a little bit of the steam out, a little bit, and you could keep going on with the industrial chain would keep going forward.
Yep.
But this is like they're coming up against conflicting needs.
Yeah.
The need to preserve the system as it is, and the need to make money.
Right.
One of those things is got to give.
Something's gonna give, right? And that's the question, right? Like January 6th, as nonsensical as that was, that's a thing, man. You don't just get 20,000 people on the lawn. You don't get 300 people in the Capitol because shit's going great, right? I think that that particular movement isn't. It's not structured well. Like they didn't really have a good plan. In fact, what they did was counter to what they professed they were going for. But look, man, it don't take much. Like again, if we get a 2024 swing and Trump goes back in, the majority of the population is anti-Trump. What does that look like? Seriously, like if the economy doesn't come back in a meaningful way, if most of the people are anti-Trump and is a police state really like, because that's where we're kind of, that's the only way to maintain that type of order. Is that going to work? I don't know, man. These are questions that I don't think me or you are going to be able to answer, but like it's a question that this society is going to have to ask itself.
Yeah, and when we've seen revolutions in the past, it has been when the state, the nation, is kind of in the position that we're in. Yeah. We have a large number of people who have been disenfranchised, and they'll put up with that if their lives are okay. But when that bottom falls out, something's got to give.
Yeah.
I think this is definitely the most radical revolutionary time we've had since 1968, since the time that Fred Hampton and Martin Luther King were all killed. Martin Luther King, who also was killed while trying to organize poor Latinos, poor whites, and poor blacks. So I think the next few years, it's going to be people aren't, you look at Twitter, like people on the left are like pissed about what's going on. Like, send the checks.
Yep.
And they're going to lose faith in you pretty quickly. They don't have the patience anymore because they're in relatively dire straits.
Sure.
So you better get it together. That's what I'm thinking,
and nothing that I'm seeing from the sort of establishment of any party looks like it's going to respond properly to that. And that's
there's no urgency. Yeah.
No. And it's because it still works for them. And that's the disconnect, right? Like you said, it works for them. It doesn't work for us. What's the inflection point where that becomes, like you mentioned before, an election is just a replacement for violence. It really is. Like, this is just peaceful transition, just saying like, look, we could fight this out, but you know what? I respect what you did there. Your numbers look strong. I'll see you in a certain amount of time. Hey man, that shit runs out when everyone feels like it's not working. But I hate to do this because this is such a good conversation, but like I gotta leave. I gotta
All right, man.
but dude, anytime you went on, like I said, I thought of you specifically. One, I'm glad you reached out, but like I thought of you specifically because I was like, I knew that you would have a good grasp of the actual mechanics of government. Like we wouldn't get bogged down in the side bullshit that everyone gets bogged down in, that we could have a real conversation.
Yeah.
Trust me, I did not think that I was going to come out of this conversation being like, communism, huh? Socialism. Like, I thought we were going to talk about like Coming to America. You know?
Oh yeah, we never even got to that shit. I mean,
next time.
Well, maybe after we see the movie, we can make an interpretation. Yeah. Although before we go, one of my favorite scenes of all time is when he steps out onto the balcony and he goes, "Good morning, neighbors. Fuck you." Fuck you. Yes. Fuck you too. It's like one of the best scenes in comedies ever.
Absolutely.
I don't know how they match that. I don't know how they hit that level, but
spoiler alert, they don't. No, I haven't watched it yet, but I already know they don't. well, Mike, man, I appreciate you. If there's anything you want to plug with Twitter or Instagram or something like that, let me know.
I don't have anything. No. All right. Just I'll send Reggie Parker the leftist reading list, and maybe we can share that with y'all in a future episode.
And you can kill us in the comments with "how you socialist cucks" or whatever. But look, man, I try to look at this.
Oh no, you broke up.
Oh, sorry. But it's like I try to look at this from like a like a clear, sober lens, and from what I'm seeing, man, like it's there. All the little pieces are in place, and I don't see how they pull up from this, man. But maybe they will. Maybe they will. Right.
We'll see, man.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Well, power to the people. I catch you. I am revolutionary.
Take it easy.
Awesome.
I need everybody to repeat after me. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. With the last words on my lips, that I am a revolutionary. And you're going to have to keep on saying that. You're going to have to say that I am a proletarian. I am the people. I'm not the pig. You got to make a distinction.